So one of the biggest things right now that we're trying to navigate in this market is that we're all feeling a bit of a shift, right? A bit of a slowdown. We're not seeing anything drastic, but we're noticing a change. Homes aren't selling as quickly. Things are getting relisted. Pricing, holdback offer dates aren't working as often, if at all. Although we hear of some success stories, it's like 50-50. Now they just announced they're putting up the rates again as of yesterday. So we're going to have another wave of reaction to that. And so the question is, when we're in this kind of a market, how do we price our homes so that they still sell, right? Because a lot of agents are still in the market of January and February. They haven't caught up yet. They haven't figured out that the market has changed, right? We're no longer in that market. Those 2 months were a special 2 months. They don't exist anymore. So whoever bought and sold in those windows, good for them, and everyone else, now we're in a new market. And then the other question is, when we have concerns about a market trending downwards, how do we price based on that? If we know that each week we think that prices are going to hold or drop, how do we price our home strategically so that we're not pricing ourselves out of the market and we're not losing the deals, right? So what does that look like when the market is trending away from where it is right now? So those are the main things I want to cover, as well as the steps of how to actually complete a CMA so that you have a full and accurate analysis. Dylan, is there anything you want to add to that? Anything else that you want to cover in the class today?
No, I would just ask for you guys that are on the call, what are some of the biggest challenges that you guys have with your CMAs currently? And what brought you to the class today? What do you want to make sure that we cover in the hour that we have together? So unmute yourself or put it in the chat. But
I got something that we could maybe throw in there. The same thing, similarly to what we saw in 2018, when the prices are starting to come down like they are, how are you educating your clients on the price that they've seen their neighbor go for a month ago is not the price that they're going to get now, right? Because that is what's going to happen. We're going to see that shift down, and people are still going to think, well, my house was better than theirs, so it's got to be worth more, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good one.
I'm going to put that in the chat just to keep track of it.
I'm already on it.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, because I'll forget.
Are you guys married or something?
Yeah, the big one there is, how do we get ahead of the market, right? Because in a downward market, you don't want to chase it down, because if you're constantly chasing, you're always behind it, right? If you don't take action soon enough, you're going to lose out on more money than you would if you had taken that offer that felt low at the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like what Mike, you said about the puck, about the hockey player. You don't
Wayne Gretzky, skate to where the puck's going to be.
Go to where the puck's going. He skates to where the puck's going. If we know it's starting to trend, then there's no point in pricing a property. Get your seller in the right alignment so that you're pricing the property to where a little bit maybe less, or where the last house sold for. And even if you have a little bit more, it is a beauty contest. That's what the MLS is. Each house is a beauty contest. They have to be the prettiest place for the best value, right? And if it's going down, then, like, certainly we want to try and price it as high as we can without overpricing or putting them in a position where we scare the buyers, right?
Right.
So I'm hoping to get from this some nuggets or something to refresh me so that we're not chasing the market. And we're seeing that now. Look at the townhouses. They're doing the same thing. They were all pricing at $799 and they were getting $999 or $1 or whatever. And then they price for a week, they hold, no offers, then they cancel. Terminate, then they relist, and then they priced at that time, which was properly, they came up 100,000 or 150,000, and then it still hasn't sold. So now they're 10 days on the market, they got nothing.
Right? We'll make sure that we go over all of that once Jen gets through the bulk of the content.
Okay, we'll talk about all that stuff. And so for those of you who just joined us, thank you so much for joining us. Just letting everyone know that Wayne unfortunately can't make it today. We had a scheduling conflict. So you've got me and Dylan jumping in to try and buffer that. And Wayne was going to come back next month, and we're going to have a special session with him on a different day. He's currently in Bold, which is why he couldn't make it today. So anyway, moving on from that, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to kind of jump into what we need to do when we're starting to prepare for a CMA, what that looks like, what information we need to gather about the home, and how we find and how we address that information. So just give me 1 second here. All right, perfect. So in your resources folder, guys, there's under CMA, there is a form called Cma Guideline, okay? I want you to just take a look at that real quick. The first page, that's for when you're making house adjustments, and full disclosure, this is old now, so those numbers probably not accurate anymore. We will update that to more accurate numbers. But the second page here, this is a list of everything that we're gonna go through and pull when we're completing a CMA. And this is here to remind you guys, especially if you don't do them that often or you haven't done one in a while or you're still learning the process, print this off or have it on your screen or put it on your pin board or whatever, have it around you so that you're kind of remembering to pull everything. And step one with the CMA is something that I think people overlook quite often is get to know the house. That's step one. How do we properly price a home if we don't know the home? So what I mean by that is if you have the ability to do it, go see the home first. If you don't, at the very least, go drive by it, drive the street, get a feel for the area, get a feel for the property, especially if it's a neighborhood you're not confident in. If you haven't been in that pocket a lot and you don't consider yourself a master of that neighborhood, then don't assume that you know just because it's a standard style home or it's a standard townhouse. Because driving down the street will tell you a lot about the feel, about the size, whether things are condensed or whether they're more spacious, what do the lots look like, how old do the homes look, what is the condition of all of the homes on the street, and all of those impact a buyer's opinion when they're looking at pricing, what they want to pay for a property, right? As Michelle said, it's a beauty contest, 100%, right? And that count on the outside as much as the inside, we're comparing all of that. So you want to know your property first and foremost. That is step one. And then step two is getting all of the information on that property. We don't want to go into a CMA and not know, has it been updated? What is the lot size? When was it last sold? What view does it have? Is it on a ravine? Does it have a pool? Is it a basic backyard? What are the details of the home? What have the current homeowners done to that home? Have they added value? Have they taken value away? Right? What's that situation look like? And we can get that information multiple ways. Again, the easiest is to go and walk through the house before you complete a CMA, because then you get all the information and you know exactly what it looks like. We don't always have time to do that. Sometimes people aren't comfortable with that. Some people don't do their business that way. They just do a CMA and then go to the listing appointment and close at the listing, which is what we call a one-step. We'll talk about that in listing appointments class. However, you still want to know the information. If you're not going to the house, call the sellers and have a conversation with them before you complete your CMA. Part of your pre-qualification script, right? Before you show up for that listing appointment, have you asked them about the home? What have they done any renovations since they bought the home, right? Look at it on Google Maps. Does it back onto green space? Does it back onto a railway track? Are there power lines beside it or near it? Is it on the same street as a school? Is there a school across the street from it? Those are things that we're not going to tell just by looking at an MLS listing, right? So do your research first. That is step one. You will be able to handle any of the objections you get from other agents, buyer agents, by knowing all of that information right up front. And two, you'll be able to complete a more accurate analysis of the home's value based on knowing all of that information. When was the furnace replaced? What type of wiring does the home have? Is it a 100 amp panel, 200 amp, 60 amp? What are we looking at, right? These are things we need to know. Once we've done all that, what we're going to do is go to public records and Geo Warehouse. So I am going to show you quickly how to do that just in Stratus here. I actually use Matrix. So for those of you that use Stratus, this is going to look a little funky, but it's the same system. It's just the Matrix format of it. So if you're in Matrix, you're just going to go to Tools and your links will pop up on the left-hand side. If you're in Stratus, they're already across the top or they're down the left, depending on how you have your page set up. So we're just going to go to public records. That's what MPAC is, the Municipal Property Assessment, which is, where is that?
Property line, the second one.
Property line, there we go. Perfect. So this is what property line or MPAC looks like. And what we're going to do is basically just pick a house. Dylan, I'm just going to use our house because
Yep.
it's easier and I already have the thing right here. So when you search for a property and you type in this information here, you're going to get a detailed report that looks like this. Okay. Now, if you are doing a CMA for a home that you're hoping to sell, on the right-hand side here, see where it says residential detail report and area report? That includes the square footage of the home. So if you don't know the square footage, or you don't have a floor plan, or you don't have information from your builder, come here and get the report. The detailed report tells you if there's any building permits that are outstanding or things that were ordered and closed. So that will guide you if there was any renovations. They tell you the year it was built and also the detailed square footage. This one is just square footage, the $5 report. So depending on what info you need, that's where you're going to find that stuff. And then this report is going to tell you the legal description, the lot size, the frontage and depth, the year the home was built, when it was last bought, what it was last paid for it, and the assessed value of the property. And if you go to the enhanced tab right here, you'll see how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, the garage, if there's a pool, what that looks like. So just by coming here, we can get a lot of the information that we need about the property in order to complete the CMA. What we don't know by just coming here and not seeing the house is the condition of everything, how it's all holding up. You can also go to MLS sales here and it will pull the most recent MLS sale. So this was when we bought our house. This is the MLS number. So if I want to pull that, I can just take that MLS number and go to that in Treb, and I'll be able to click right here, view in Toronto MLS, and it'll populate the listing where it's supposed to. Apparently it didn't there, but I can pull the MLS number from here, and then I can pull that listing in Stratus. I'll just go right here. If you're in Matrix, or if you're in Stratus in the shortcut, you can just paste the MLS number into the quick search and hit search, and it will pull up the listing for you. So you don't have to do all those extra steps. And then what we're going to do after we have checked out MPAC, I'm going to go to GEHO Warehouse in a second. I'll show you what that looks like. After we've talked to the sellers, we have all the information we need. Now I'm going to look at the property itself and see, you know what does it look like? What's the condition of the house, right? Before I do that, I'm just going to jump back here to property line. If you want to take a look at the GEHO Warehouse, which is the land registry report, this right here, this little orange house, click on that. It will take you right through. Each year we get 2,000 searches and for free through GEHO Warehouse. This is just telling us that we're using one of those searches. So I'm just going to click OK. If you're on a Mac, it blocks it every time. Just hit the block up popper and hit allow. If you're on a PC, it'll work, no problem. Now it's going to show you the lot and the location of the property. So I can see that information. And then if I scroll down, here's all the details about the home. Here's the homeowners. So what we bought it for. This is the lot size. Here's the legal description. Here's an exterior shot of the home, right? We can see it's a double car garage. It's a 2-story house. It has a private driveway, and all that information will be found here as well. This is beneficial when you're doing a listing and when you're working on a buy side, because you want to verify on the buy side that all of this information matches what's on the listing, that the legal description is accurate, that the seller's names are correct. And on the listing side, the PIN number is here, all the details of the property are here. And you can also buy additional reports on this if you want to. You can also see the square footage, which is right here, 50 by 100. And so on. And what's more interesting too, there are more reports here. If you scroll down, you can also see the history of the property, how many times it's been sold. And if you continue down, you will get eventually to the school reports and the park information, as well as the demographics of the area. So you want to make sure that you're utilizing all of this information. The demographics and such more so probably with a buyer, but they're also very helpful if you're planning on marketing the property, because I can see who lives in this neighborhood. Right now in our area, it's mainly older couples whose kids have grown up in these homes and have moved out. And then you can see the younger generation that are doing what we're doing, buying, renovating, and staying in the neighborhood, right? So you can see that trend. And you can also see the status. Majority of people are married. It's 50-50 male to female. You know, all of that information that you want to know. It's 100% owned. There's not a lot of rentals in our neighborhood, which is something you'd like to know. That's really important if you're looking at a condo building. You want to know, as if you're representing a buyer or even an investor, Are there a lot of rentals or not a lot of rentals? What are we buying into here? The age of the home and so on. So you can go through this entire report. You can even share this report with your sellers or buyers if you'd like to, but that's how you access that. So going back to the listing, now that we've checked Geo Warehouse, we've checked MPAC, now we want to look at the MLS listing, which I'm pretty sure I just closed, but that's okay. There it is, and see the house. So what I want to look at is the rest of the details. Is there a finished basement, unfinished basement, all that sort of information, because we need to know this in order to complete our CMA. Now, the other thing I want to do is take a look at the pictures. What you guys are going to see is what the house looked like before we renovated it, because we have done a full reno on this at this point. But this is what it looked like when we bought it. So we can see that, you know, it's not in terrible shape, but it's mismatched and it's dated, and it's got the old original tile floors, and you know, it looks a little dark, things like that. It has stucco ceilings, all that kind of thing, right? But I can also get a feel for the space. What does it kind of feel like? What's the layout of the home? Is it a central kitchen? Is it a side kitchen? Because those things impact your pricing as well, right? Is there a dining room, a family room, a den, right? What does every room look like? The old drop ceiling. Yeah, so you can kind of tell that it's dated, but it's not in bad shape, right? Now, the difference between looking at pictures online and physically being in the house sometimes can be astronomical, because I can tell you the home was it was pretty rough when we bought it. Like, it needed a lot, it needed cleaning. These pictures, it actually looks not bad, right? It just looks dated, but the home did need some help. So we can get a feel for that. Now, by knowing that we did a full reno, I can now ask my seller and say, well, what did you renovate, or how much did you invest in the property? And try and figure out, okay, did they do a complete overhaul? Did they gut it? Or did they just do some paint and some floors and kind of clean it up, right? For us, for example, we did everything new. There's a new kitchen, there's new floors, there's new ceilings, there's pot lights, all of that sort of stuff. So it's a full reno. So when we're pricing it now, we're going to approach this differently because we can't use the pictures. So again, seeing it helps. But the key things we want to note is, what's the square footage, right? In our case, it's 2,400 is the actual square footage of our property. What's the frontage? What's the depth? Is the basement finished or unfinished? Is it full or half or crawl space? Is there another kitchen or an apartment in the basement? The garage, is it attached, detached? We want to get all the details of the property. And one of the things a lot of people overlook is to read the client remarks. Oftentimes they will say in here, the window was replaced in 2014, the roof was 2012, things like that. And if you read it, you can get a lot of that information. If it doesn't say anything like that, there's a good chance that it either wasn't done, or the previous owners weren't the ones to do it, and it was done a lot earlier. So then we can ask our sellers again, do you know the age of these things? Because having everything new, the roof, the window, the furnace, if all of that's updated, there's value in that, right? If everything is original, there's no value in that. So we can gauge again on how do we price this by knowing that information. And that's really the most that you're going to get from the listing. That's what we look at the listing for. And of course, when did it sell last, and what did it sell for? If you can't find the listing, there's a good chance that it's never been on MLS, which means it hasn't sold since about 1978, 1979 is when they went back to a certain point. So if someone's been in their home for like 70 years, you're not going to find a little listing on MLS. So now you would, at that point, you would have to go see the home, because there's no way to know how to price it otherwise. Okay. So based on all of that, knowing what we know, knowing the renovations, knowing the area, knowing the lot size, what we're going to do now is take a look at what else is sold on that street in the last little while. So how it works when you do a CMA, guys, I want you to picture a bullseye. Okay. You start in the middle. We start micro. What are the closest things that have sold? What's sold most recently? That's going to be my most accurate indicator of what's happening in this micro community that I'm trying to price this home in, because every community is a little different. This pocket, Aurora Village, is not going to sell the same as Bayview and Wellington, right? Or Bayview East and all of those different pockets. They just don't. They're all their own micro communities. So you have to price within that neighborhood specifically. That's a mistake a lot of people make. They go broad. They're like, oh, I can just look at all the 4-bedroom detached in Aurora. If you know Aurora really well, yeah, you could do that because you know where to add and adjust, you know what neighborhoods sell higher and what sell lower, but it's still going to create a wider median than you would want. You want to be more focused and more in the specific community. So when you are searching, we want you to start by searching specifically in the community, which is Aurora Village, or you can do a map search if that's easier, right? And we're going to pull any of the comps, any of the homes that have sold in that neighborhood. So if I go back to residential freehold, because that's what we're looking at, and I go to sold homes, you can do this in Stratus as well. You can pick the date range, right? So I'm going to say, we know the market has started to turn in the last 30 to 60 days. So I'm going to say in the last 60 days, I want to see any detached homes, 3 to 4 bedroom. Ideally, I want to stick with 4 bedrooms. So we'll see what comes up first in Aurora Village, right? I always still have a habit of writing Toronto. Okay, so we want to set those specific parameters to that neighborhood. And then I'm going to keep it generic to that 4 bedroom detached Aurora Village. Let's see how many matches we've got. There's been 8 sales in the last 60 days in that pocket. So I'm going to click on the results and I'm going to take a look at these listings. Now, all of these listings are valuable information, but some of them are not going to be comparables to our property, right? So this is where we, again, need to know the locations and how they impact, because Aurora Village is north and south of Wellington. It goes down to the south side. We live north, right? So our north prices are going to be different than the south prices. And in fact, there's even another line about halfway up around Batson where the prices shift again. So if you're south of Batson or north of Batson, there's a shift. This is where knowing your market becomes extremely important. And how you learn this, guys, is by going and previewing homes. So when we're in classes and we tell you to go look at houses, this is why. I know that because I know my neighborhood, right? But if I've never been in that neighborhood, how would I know that? And then I might look at comps further south and not know to adjust for where they're located. So what we're going to do is take a look at all of these listings. We just start to review the data. This one is, I think it's Mackle. I never know how to pronounce that. Mackle or Michelle Street, but we can actually see that it's a similar lot size, but the house is a good bit smaller than ours, right? We can just tell just by looking at it. Now it's a nice looking home. And I'm just going to take a look at the pictures really quick, but it's not a great comp for us because it's a different style property. It's a different type of house. It's got a nice big deep lot as well. And if I'm not mistaken, this is south of Wellington, but I'm just going to confirm that. Right, so it looks nicely updated. I'm just going to take a look at the map real quick. And this is what we want to be doing. Oh no, it's north, but it's on the other side of Yonge. So again, we're on this side of Yonge, and we're on the east side of Yonge. They're on the west side of Yonge. That's also a different neighborhood, right? These areas price differently. They're different pockets. So you have to know that as well. So I know that even though this is, a nice home, this area doesn't price quite as high as where our house is, right? Based on the location, that's really the only thing. The house itself looks quite nice. It's also a smaller home. So I'm not going to use that as a comp because it doesn't really fit what I'm looking for. So when we first start the search, our job is to find the best possible comparable properties. That's what we're looking for. So we're just going to filter through. What's the next one? Harrison. That's a much smaller house. It's under 2,000 square feet. I'm going to skip that one over as well. This is on the south side of Wellington. It's an older style home. It's much smaller than ours. I'm going to bypass that one also. So what you're going to see start to happen is we're going to start removing a lot of houses, right? And that's normal. So don't get worried when that starts to happen because you will find good comparables. This is an example of a good comparable. Atridge, it is, Altridge, I think it, oh no, it is Atridge. It is right at the end of our street. This house is not far from our house. It's a similar looking style house. It's actually a 5-bedroom house. However, one of those bedrooms is in the basement. So that tells us they have a finished basement. We don't have a finished basement, right? So now we're starting to look at the similarities and the differences. Their lot is 49 by 137. Ours is 50 by 100. They have a slightly deeper lot than we do, right? They have a full finished basement where our basement is unfinished. So we're starting to compare, but the main things we want to look at is it's in the same neighborhood. It is the same style house. It is a similar lot size, which tells us that the square footage is going to be similar. And then the final thing to look at is how does it compare in condition, right? So let's take a look at the pictures. So it looks like it is updated. It's got hardwood floors. It's got a nice modern paint color. It's a central kitchen style. And the reason I point that out, guys, is because if you know the homes in Aurora and in Newmarket, the central kitchen usually means that it's a smaller kitchen, and that the flow of the house is a little more cut off because you have a living room, dining room on one side, and then you have a small family room on the other side, versus the kitchen, the other kitchens on either side where you have a bigger center flow and you can have a nice family room as well. So keep that in mind. That is a shift in the layout. We can also see here the backyard, it starts to go up. It's mainly raised, and there's a sound wall here because this backs onto the train tracks, right? So we now know our house doesn't back onto the train tracks. This house does. We have to adjust for that. And even though it's in nice condition, it's not as updated. The renovations aren't as new as the property we're comparing. So this is a good comparable, and we're going to keep it in our list. So here's that smaller family room I was telling you about. We're going to keep it in our list. However, we're going to acknowledge that we're a superior home to this property, right? We don't have the train tracks behind this. We don't have the central kitchen layout. And it is updated. It's not, it looks quite nice. So that being said, we're going to just give this guy a little check mark because we like him, and we're going to keep moving. The next one is Cedar Crescent. Now, Cedar Crescent, this is a side split style house. It's further south. It's just north of Wellington. It's further south than we are. It's south of Batson. And the layout is a very different layout. It has a single attached car garage. We have a double attached car garage. The lot, they have a nice lot, 54 by 145. And there's actually a school park right here to the right of it. So there's no neighbors, which is nice as well. There's a big green space here. However, the home itself is smaller and it's more dated, right? Now, again, if you're checking out your neighborhood and you're previewing the homes, the benefit of that is you'll also have been in a lot of the homes that you're looking at as comparable. So you'll be able to speak to them at a higher level. I've been in this house. So I actually know at a high level, it's quite a nice house. It showed very well. It only has 3 bedrooms upstairs. There was no ensuite, and it's a very old style setup with smaller rooms, smaller principal rooms. And it doesn't have that large main floor open flow that the home we have does, but it does have a lower level family room. So this is one that I would keep as a if I need it kind of comp, because the neighborhood is okay and the square footage is okay. However, it's not the same type of home, so they're not going to price quite the same way, right? But if I only find one other good comparable, I might use this and make adjustments on it because it's in the right pocket. So I'm going to check this one off for now, and I'm going to keep moving. There's another Atridge, 56 Atridge. Again, we know it's in the right neighborhood. There is a crescent at the end of Atridge, so not every house on Atridge backs on the train tracks. Obviously, we want to know if it's on the east or the west side of the street. This one is fronting on the west side of the street, which means it does not back onto the train tracks. So we're going to take a look at this one. Looks like it's nicely updated. It's got a pool. It's got a green space behind it, which is nice as well. It's got a nice big deep lot. That is superior to our subject property. And then we're going to look at the inside, and it is nicely updated, and it looks to be nicely renovated, right? So we're going to consider the kitchen is off to the side. Again, you get a bit of a bigger kitchen and you get a bit of a bigger family space because of that, okay? And then so you can also, you get the benefit of having this open family room to the kitchen, which is something that people like and will pay a little bit money for. So you see where we're going this when we're looking with the comparables. We're looking for homes that match or are similar to the style and the look of our property. And then we're comparing their conditions, right? So I'm going to give this one a check. It is a superior property, but I'm going to check it off anyway because it's a good comparable. And then we got this one on Harriman, which is a bungalow. It's on a 200-foot lot. Like, we're not going to make those adjustments right now. We're just going to say that that's not a good comparable. And then this one on Tyler Street, which is a brand new build and sold for $2.5 million. That's not a comparable either. So basically what I'm going to do next is just go back and look at the ones I've saved. So in the last 60 days, what have I got? I've got 3 listings in my neighborhood, 1.5, 1.5, and 1.9. 2 inferior and 1 superior. So what we can already tell by this is we land somewhere in the middle of 1.5 and 1.9, but where do we land? Now that's going to depend on how much better or how much worse we are than those other properties. Ideally, we want to be working with 6 or 7 comps to kind of get a better range. However, sometimes in this market, when there's less sales, we end up with less comps, right? What we could do if we wanted to extend a little bit is I could look at other neighborhoods that are close to me and similar in age that are in Aurora that are also selling. But like I said, they're not going to be the exact same as our pocket. So I'm going to stop there for a second. I want to check the chat. And Dylan, is there anything you want to add to that before we move on?
Nothing to add at the moment. It doesn't look like there's anything in chat other than Ben just mentioned my experience with clients that find out the home backs onto the train tracks as they run. Yeah, very true. Very
Yeah.
true. There's a lot of people that will avoid that altogether. And so it can be a tricky one to adjust for because it does vary depending on the client. Because I have sold backing onto train tracks before and still managed to do okay because typically the lot depth on those properties is much greater than anything else in the area.
Mm-hmm.
So it does depend, but you're always going to take a hit. And sometimes that hits easily 100,000.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have had it happen once and never since, where I had a client ask to be on train tracks, which I thought was the weirdest thing, because everyone, I was like, this is great. I can get you a stellar deal because everyone else is running the other way and they specifically wanted tracks. If they grew up around them or something, it was a nostalgic thing. It was very bizarre. But sometimes you get that buyer that's motivated, right? So we don't write everybody off. But yeah, up to $100,000 swing, especially in Aurora, in the new market and pockets where we are, that's very valid. And same with the Ravine on the flip side. Everyone wants the green space, right? So you could see a $50,000, $100,000 swing in the other direction for green space. So that's why we need to know what's around our property. Power lines are a big one. Some people aren't bothered by them, and some people, same thing. The minute they see them, they won't even look at the house, right? So these are things we need to know so we can prepare our seller and have these conversations, or prepare our buyer and have these conversations. And thank you, Michelle. I like that you think our house looks nice now. Just wanted to note that you said that. Okay, so
I'm in here, Jen, real quick. I think what we've done so far is one of the first steps that I'd highly recommend with any CMA is looking at your sales. You want to try and find your best 3. It's funny that we actually landed on 3, but to find your best 3 comparable sales in the most recent, like as the closest period to when you're thinking about selling, or currently, I should say. And that's going to be your best kind of guide in terms of taking the next step. There's a lot more that we need to look at, but I always want to find at least 3 really good comparables is my goal. If they're not there, then it's different. I gotta branch out, but I want to try and find 3.
Yeah, exactly. And based on timing, these probably are the best 3. Cedar's a bit of a asterisk because it's not the same style of property, and it is further south of that Batson line that we were talking about. But the timeline of the sales is important. Now, I would say that for me, I don't have enough data yet. I need a bit more information in order to determine where my price is going to fall. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go back a little further. I'm at 60 days right now. I'm going to go back to 120 days and see what happened there. What I know, and this is where we have to get into the conversation about seeing a market start to shift, is that what I know about those homes that I see sell in January and February is I have to make it a time adjustment for them. And we're going to do that by looking at our stats and looking at Market Watch and seeing, what's the average price now versus what was the average price in January, and figuring out what the percentage difference is and adjusting the sale prices accordingly to match today's market. Okay. So that's how we adjust for time. We base it on the time frames and the averages. So what I'm going to do here is just go back to my criteria real quick, and I'm going to change this 160, and I'm going to do 60 days to 100, and actually, no, I'll do 0 because I didn't save those guys, to 180 or 120, sorry. As you're going, guys, the best tip I can give you is start a cart for your CMA. So as you're finding comparables, save them into the cart for that property. Okay, so what I mean by that, and I haven't really done this too often on Matrix, so I have to figure this out. Let me go to results here real quick. There's now 12. So we picked up some more listings, which is good. So hopefully there's some more comps in there. And then what I'm going to do here is go save or cart, sorry. and I'm going to create a new cart for this property. So I'm just going to say 30 Buchanan. There we go. And I'm going to save that cart. Now what I can do is as I go through and I pick the ones that I like, we know we have, which ones were there? Let me see. There was Cedar, there was Atridge, and there was Atridge. I know these guys are already good ones. So I'm just going to check them off and we're going to check out the new ones. So Moorcrest popped up. Let's just take a look here real quick. We looked at that one. We looked at that one. We looked at that one. This one is one we're going to explore. So this one sold on Moorcrest for 1.57. And when did it sell? It sold January 17th. So we know that it sold in a hot market, right? A market that is more aggressive than the market we're in now. So let's take a look at the property. Moorcrest is very close to our property. It's a 2-car garage. It's a 50 by 100 foot lot. That's the same as us. It's a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom. That's also the same as us. It has a partially finished basement. We have an unfinished basement, and it has a 2-car garage, which we do. So on paper, there are a lot of comparable assets to this property from ours. Let's take a quick look at the pictures. Slightly different style, right? It's not quite a full 2-story, but it is a 2-story house. Has a nice deck. Our backyard really, similar size, doesn't have really anything in it yet. And then the inside from the pictures, it looks to be in okay shape. Now, Dylan, I'm going to throw this to you really quick because I know you were in this house. So give us your feedback on the property, having gone through it.
Yeah, so the main floor, it was staged really nicely. The floors were in okay shape. I can't remember if they were laminate or hardwood. I remember not being overly impressed by them. Yeah, so laminate makes sense. Yeah. Center kitchen design. So again, not as much flow. And the family room was a sunken family room, which, take it or leave it on whether that's something that you like. The big impact there was the basement, because the one area, that whole side of the house wasn't as usable because of the sunken family room.
Mm-hmm. I just want to take a note to enjoy this moment that this picture, someone got caught running through the door frame. So every once in a while we find fun pictures when we're doing this, and I just want to enjoy that. Yeah, so I remember you showing this to clients of ours, and the center kitchen, again, allowing for lack of flow, and just feeling that the home wasn't actually as in good condition as it looked in the photos and pictures, right?
Yeah. And so there was you can keep going through, but because you'll see the second floor, I'd be interested to see how the photos look. So yeah, go back to the sunken photo because there was a question about that.
Sure.
In the family room. So it was it's a step down. It's not on the exact same level as the rest of the house. Mm-hmm. So you step down into the family room. But that step down made an impact in the basement because now the roof is lower in the basement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, such a funny thing to do. Weird.
Yeah. And then we'll see how the second floor looks, but in person, the second floor was definitely the least impressive area of the house. The photos actually they don't look terrible.
The photos look nice. They did a good job.
That's why you have to go into houses. Like the impression of the house when you were inside it felt a little old. The floors felt a little slanted. There was a
slope, wasn't it sloped? Yeah, the floors were sloped or something.
There was a stain on the ceiling. There was a bunch of things that just made you feel not necessarily the greatest about the second floor.
Right. And this sold by a bully offer in January. It didn't make it to offer date. So it's always interesting to know that as well when you're looking at the comps. So keep in mind that this sold in a market where everybody was aggressively bidding and people were trying to scoop up properties the minute they came on the market, and homes that weren't in the best of shape sold for good prices. Now this sold for 1.57. We're going to take a note of that. We're going to keep moving on, but we're going to come back to that to do a time adjustment in a few minutes so you guys can see how we do that, right?
Anushka, did you want to unmute yourself for that question, or were you going to type it in the chat?
I unmuted. It'll be easier just for me to say it than actually type it out. So one of the issues I have when I'm pricing a home is, okay, so you go look at the home and there's a few things that have to get done. So are you pricing the home based on what the home is at that point, or you're pricing it based on when they do their renovations and when it's staged and marketed?
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
After you, Jen. No, after you.
Are they doing the work before you put it on the market?
Yes.
Then you would price it based on the work being completed.
Okay.
Yeah. Now what you
Not-
want to do though, put an asterisk beside that until you've seen the quality of the work, right? So assume it's going to be a certain price and then go look at it before you actually finalize your price.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I that's a hard one, right? You go to price somebody's home and you know they'll need to paint and a few things
Yeah.
that will need to get done, and then
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And what you can do there is give them a price based on current condition and then an estimated price based on if they did the work, so that they can see, because sometimes it's not even worth it to do the work. Depending, it might be when we're in a market that's trending downwards, if it's going to take them a month to get the work done, what's it going to cost them to wait a month to sell their house? Because
Yeah.
if the cost is higher than the work, then just list it as it is, because they're not going to benefit from that. In an uptrending market, different story, right? They'll make everything they do is going to be an added bonus to their sale price. But in a downtrending market, you want your house to show and look really well, but you don't want to be losing money every month because you're waiting to do some renovations, right?
okay.
Yeah.
Exactly. If
Thank you.
the market is down, but it's stable, like it's not dropping month over month, then it may be an issue of where you actually have to do the work to be the one that sells. If at that point 10 are selling and there's 13 on, or sorry, 2 are selling a month and there's 13 on the market, well, then you need to stand out to be the one that sells. But if we're trending downwards, like Jen said, you want to get out there sooner than later.
Yeah, just do the math on the numbers, right? And have that conversation with your client. So what we've basically determined, guys, is that we've ended up with 4 decent comparables within our own neighborhood in the past, 120 days that have sold, 3 of which have been in the last 60 days, 1 of which was in the last 120 days. The one in the last 120 days is one of the better comparables. However, it's sold in an up market and we have to make an adjustment for when it's sold. So how we do that is like I said earlier, I'm just going to add these guys to my cart real quick so that I don't lose them. And then we're going to go to Market Watch and we're going to take a look at the report from January versus the report from today. So if I go back to my main page and I believe I just click on Market Stats and I go to Market Watch. Okay. And I just want to go to, there's historic reports or archives, and there's the current full report. So what we're going to do real quick is go, okay, what's the current report? This is our March report. And if you look in the top right corner, it'll show you what we're looking at. So these are a year-to-date stats. These are all home types across the GTA in March. I'm looking for detached homes specifically because that's what I'm looking to price. So that's the number I need. So I'm going to keep scrolling down until I get to detached homes. And then on the left-hand side here, I'm looking for Aurora, right? There were 77 sales in March, 170 new listings. So we can do the math on that. The median price is the price we want to work with, not the average, okay? When we're looking at these numbers, because the median removes those anomalies, the $9 million house that sold and the 600 tear down that sold, and it averages out everything else. 1.9277 is the current detached average of a home in Aurora, okay? We're going to remember that number, 19277. Now what I'm going to do is go back to my Market Watch and I'm going to go to the archives and I'm going to go to January because that's when this property sold, and I'm going to go to the same page. I think it was page 3. No, page 6, 7 I want. Yeah. And then Aurora here. So the median price was 1.780. Interesting, right? Let me just make sure I'm looking at the same thing. Detached March, Aurora, 1.927. January, 1.7. So what does that tell us? I'm going to throw that out to you guys. What would you do if you saw that? What would your reaction be?
We have to adjust. The market's gone up.
Mm-hmm. So what that tells us is that even though we're plateauing right now, we have not dropped back down below what the homes were selling for in the earlier months of the year at this point in time. So do we need to adjust that property? Anybody?
I would say yes.
Well, in actual fact, no, we don't really need to adjust it because the prices currently haven't dipped back down below what the averages were 3 months ago, right? So we don't need to make a time adjustment. Now, if this said like 2 million and the other one said the 1.927, we'd have to adjust for the percentage difference down on this comparable that we're looking at. Does that make sense to everybody? This can be a bit confusing, so I want to make sure that it makes sense before we move on. Dylan, any thoughts on that?
I missed the first one. Can you show me the current stats or the ones for March?
Yeah, it's right there. Aurora.
That's interesting. We saw a big increase in sales in March at 77 and an increase in average price. So
yeah, so two things to think about here. When we're having this conversation with our sellers and we're hearing all over the place, the market is turning, the market is shifting, and then we look at this, is that true? Right? What we do know is we have more inventory. So are people equating a lack of frenzy with a shifting market? Or are the numbers actually showing that there's a shifting market? Now, this is March. April might tell a different story. So we have to be aware that we have to look at the April report that's going to come out in 2 weeks and adjust based on that also, right? So averages are averages. They're broad. So it's you have to base it on your gut as well. What I will say is that we are seeing the prices drop in a lot of the pockets, or at least in some of the pockets where they got really high, right? Homes are being underpriced to create multiple offers. Yeah, so the answer to that question, how to come to the effective price, is to do a CMA. Don't worry about what the list price is. The list price is the list price, right? You can list a house at any number you want to. What matters is what are the comparable homes selling for? That's the price that you're trying to keep within. So when we list at $799, knowing we want to get a mill, when I'm pulling comps, I'm having that conversation with my buyer to say, like, yeah, they underlisted the property in order to create a bidding war. The average, the market value price of the home is $1 million. So if they get 1.1 or 1.2, then amazing, they got above market. Most of the time we're still ending up at market value. But if you guys had listings in January and February, what we were seeing was that every time something sold, the price went higher, right? So if you lost out on a house on week 1, on week 2, it was an extra $20 or $30 or $50,000 for the same type of home. That growth has stopped. We've stopped seeing that, right? But we haven't quite yet seen the results of the market trending downward. That doesn't mean it's not coming. Doesn't mean April's report isn't going to look different than this. It just means March hasn't shown it yet. Yeah, Michelle, 1 second. Here's the January report. This is the median here, right? So what you can do, guys, is look at all of the other stats. Number of sales, 31 in January. So demand, right? Active listings, 38 active listings versus 31 sales. Almost every home sold that month. How many now are not selling? Those are numbers we need to look at. If we go back to March, right? 77 sales, 98 active listings. That's a big difference. More homes are not selling, which tells us also that buyers are getting more options, which tells us that demand is lowering, which tells us that prices are going to start to level off or start to decline, right? Even though we haven't seen them yet. Also, they were averaging 113% of their price in January. They're averaging 109% now, right? So that's telling us a story. Average days on market is 8 in March. What was it in January? It was 9, funnily enough. That's funny. But offer dates, right? They kind of control that window a little bit. So the stats are important when you're doing CMAs. It's not just about the comps. You need to understand this stuff. So all those questions we had about how to speak to our clients, these are the answers. We tell them this information. We teach them what's happening in the market, educate them. When I go to do a CMA, I run through all of the stats, all of the information, what's happening in the market, what we're experiencing, and then I tell them the price of their home. So I buffer my conversation with all of that information. And then I shift and say, okay, now let's look at the comparable sales, right? So speaking of, let's flip back to the comparable sales. I know we're getting close to the 3 o'clock mark and I want to make sure we get to the end of this. Let's take a look. Where'd my list go? There it is. The transition is frustrating. It's tricky, right? It's hard. And you got to know in a transition, every week is different, right? So every time you do a CMA, even if you do a CMA on the exact same house, but you do it next week, do a new CMA. It's not going to be the same. Something's going to be different, right? Either there's more competition, another house didn't sell, or the market has shown a little bit of another drop in the last sale that we saw. But we have to be on top of this repeatedly. So if we come back to our selected comparables, we now have 4 instead of 3, which helps a little. And here's what we see again, 157. So we're almost at 16, 1516, 15, and then 19. Now we know when we look at this 19 that it's beautifully renovated. It has a bigger lot and it has a pool, okay? This is where our adjustments start to come into place. So Dylan, I'm gonna ask you some quick questions here just to kind of go through how we would adjust this. When I look at this listing, and we can see the lot and the pool and the green space that it's backing onto. What roughly, you don't, obviously this isn't a science, guys, people ask us this a lot. What's the value of a pool versus not a pool? What's the value? It is an indistinct number, guys. There's no exact formula. There's no exact equation. Some buyers love a pool. Some buyers look at it as a cost that they're going to have to remove it. It's all relative. If it's a brand new pool, there's more value than if it's an old pool because it needs more renovation and upkeep, right? If you inherit a pool, but it's 12 years old and the liner is old and the pump is old, that's an expense, right? It's not necessarily a benefit. So depending on the buyer and depending on how they value it, that's what's going to determine what the value is. Now, backing onto green space is a little more tangible. Depending on the location, it can be worth a lot more. It can be worth a little more. If a lot of homes in the area have green space, it's worth less. If only 10 homes in that neighborhood have green space, it's worth a lot more, right? So give or take, Dylan, what would you ballpark this if you were doing the CMA? What would you allow for this green space in this pool?
Yeah, well, first, just to clarify for this one, the one on Attridge, I believe it is backing onto the tracks as well. It's not green space back there. It is tracks.
No, I think this one is not. It's on the other side of the street, I'm pretty sure.
I think it's an even number one, but we'd have to look at the map again. So
anyways, yeah, it could
regardless,
be
let's say for the pool, let's start with the pool. Now, this is a different answer compared to before COVID, but since COVID had started, when people were kind of locked in and nowhere to go with their kids and all that stuff, pools all of a sudden got a big premium. There was a lot of people that still would never buy a house with a pool. It's not what they're interested in, but the people that wanted pools versus the people that when they were competing against other people that wanted pools, I'd easily see a difference somewhere in the 60 to 90,000 range, almost regardless of what the quality of the pool was. As long as it wasn't like falling apart, as long as it was still decent, anywhere in that 60 to 90,000 range for a decent backyard with a pool. Now, everything else still has to match up. It can't be garbage, but I'd say that was the range that I was seeing in general around Aurora.
Okay. So Justine just confirmed that this is on the track side because she sold the listing 2 doors down.
There you go.
So thanks, Justine. I appreciate that. So yeah, so if we're allowing for the pool, and I agree with you, since COVID, the value of pools has gone up exponentially for sure. And it also has a deeper lot. Now we have to adjust for the fact that there are tracks back there. So
I'm gonna jump in there because I think this is a good question that May just asked.
Yeah.
Can you explain how you got to that number? Right. And so this is the tricky thing when it comes down to doing any CMA, when we're breaking down the differences between houses. There's a couple ways that you come to it, but ultimately, let's look at who's deciding the value of these. Who's actually determining the price of what these homes sell for? It's the buyers, right? So it always goes back to what is an educated, willing buyer or a buyer willing to pay for a property, right? And so sometimes that varies, and sometimes it's done based on what we see like a replacement cost is. You know, is it going to cost me $50,000 to put in a pool and then another 10, 15, 20,000 to do my landscape that goes around it? And then how much more am I willing to pay just to have that already done on an existing pool? Mm-hmm. So it does vary. There's no exact science to it, but at the very least, the guidelines for yourselves, I would start with is start getting educated on what it's going to cost to replace that product. So if I'm looking at a property with no finished basement versus a finished basement, I want to have a rough idea of what it's going to cost to finish a basement. And then two, know your neighborhood, like Jen's been preaching the whole time, is if I'm watching this neighborhood and I'm seeing, because in a neighborhood, there's usually only 4 or 5 different types of models of homes. So once you get to see them and you start seeing them sell, you learn, about what they're going for. And so if I've got 2 similarly priced homes, one's got a pool and doesn't, over time, I'm going to see what buyers were willing to pay for the ones with pools versus not. So it is hard to go into a neighborhood blind sometimes and figure out what that value is. You really have to look back at what at comparable sales. And sometimes, for example, Jen, if we don't have a good comparable now with a pool or without a pool, maybe I'll look back 6 months and see if I can find 2 good comparables then that sold in the same window, one with a pool, without a pool, and see what the differences were and see if I can equate what that buyer thought the pool was worth.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because that's always been my answer to that question too, is go find 2 similar properties that one has a pool and one doesn't, or one has a finished basement and one doesn't, or one has a 2-car, right? That's your best way, because that's what is going to tell you what the buyers value it at. And then, as Dylan said, the replacement cost is a great place to start. There are in the actual resources folder, there's a Reno quote booklet from 2019. Now you can get these online, and I'm sure they have a more updated one now, but this will actually tell you what the average quotes were for the different types of renovations and stuff throughout the home. So if you don't know, this is a decent place to start. But if you truly want to know, ask a contractor. Have a contractor that you trust, that you like, who you know does good work, and ask them, right? Go to your team. This is where your allied resources and your team can give you this information. Pillar to Post, thank you, Michelle. Pillar to Post has booklets as well. Yeah, your home inspectors often know this stuff. Use your resources, guys. Oh, nice. She has one there.
And to follow up with May's question there, for example, for a roof, I would just look at what the replacement cost is of new shingles.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
if it's a simple job, anywhere from, on the townhomes, maybe 5,000 to 7,000. And then on the bigger homes, 7 to 10 and upwards, again, depending on the pitch of the roof, all that stuff makes a difference. But it comes down to actually getting a quote or learning to get quotes for those replacements.
Yeah, and having your team in place to ask, right? That's why we talk about allied resources and stuff like that, for these exact reasons. But yes, knowing replacement is step one. So say we allowed, you said about around 90,000, Dylan, was what you would estimate for that?
Yeah, I said a window of like 60 to 90, depending on the pool and the yard and all that stuff.
And then let's assume now that we know there's tracks back there. What do we deduct back? Because now there's tracks. So how do we now draw back the number?
What do you got there, Michelle?
20K for the tracks.
Oh, I'd do more. Yeah, I would do more.
Yeah. I would have thought 40 to 50 personally in this neighborhood, but that might be high. Yeah. Because there's a whole row of homes in this neighborhood specifically that all back onto tracks, right? Because they run right up through that east side. So Justine, you did a deal on these types of properties recently. What did you guys adjust for when you did the deal?
So we sold number 60 exclusive for 1.5. But it's exactly what you guys were saying before. Like, we had a couple showings before we hit the market, and there were like one family that, I mean, you can hear it, right? When you're standing in the kitchen, you can like feel the train go by too. So it really depends on the person. Like, obviously the people that bought the house, they didn't care at all. So I think it depends, but if I had to guess, like I would say upwards of, like, personally for myself, I would say upwards of like 50,000. I think that's a tough thing, right?
I think the important thing to note as well is it varies depending on the price point. If that's a $600,000 townhome, 50,000 is probably way too much. But if you're spending, 1.5, 1.7, then it's a bigger value. I'm spending so much money. Do I want to spend all this money and be on train tracks? Right? I'm going to need a bigger discount to justify being on the train tracks at that price point.
Yeah, and Michelle brings up another good point. Is it a freight train or is it like a GO train? And when is it running? And is it going overnight with horns blaring, or is it just during the daytime hours like the GO train might be? Those are all factors that we need to explore as a buyer's agent to fully educate our buyer. And again, stuff we need to know in order to handle objections from buyer's agents when we're on the listing side. Because when you have a listing with train tracks and things like that, as Justine said too, buyers are going to use that against you. They're going to try and leverage that to save the most money possible. So ultimately, as Dylan mentioned with the pool, it comes down to what's a buyer willing to pay or not pay for that property. But on a $1.5 million home, yeah, you know, 50,000 is not an unrealistic swing for being on tracks versus not being on tracks, right? Because it does impact your quality of living. And these tracks are right behind the houses, so you do hear it, right? You do feel it. It's not like it's far away. So no, again, coming back to knowing your neighborhood. So this one sold at 1.9, right? And it sold in April. So it's a very recent sale, and it was beautifully renovated. It also has a fully finished basement. Now I know for a fact that the cost to renovate a basement right now is anywhere from 75 to 100,000 to do a full reno and to do it nicely, right? I'm not talking about bang up some laminate and throw up some drywall and that. I mean, like, do a nice reno with a rec room and a fireplace and all kinds of things. So what we want to look at is that condition prevalent here, which I believe it is. Let me just keep clicking through here real fast. And it was not a center kitchen, which means the main floor has a better flow and a better layout. And the basement is, by the looks of it, looks like it's nicely finished. It's got laminate floors. They did framed out the stairwell. Nice built-ins here with a fireplace. Like, this is not a bad, I haven't been in this home, but I would arguably say that they probably spent close to 100K or so looking at this bathroom, if not a little bit more on that basement, right? We don't have a finished basement, so we can automatically deduct 100,000 from this sale price right now. So that drops us to 1.8, right? Then we can pop it up a little bit more because they have the tracks, but they also have a bigger lot, so we pop it back down. Those are a wash. Those numbers are relatively a wash. Maybe there's an extra 30,000, so that brings us down to about 1.77, right? From the 1.8, if we allow the extra 30,000 because we were allowing 90 for the pool and 50 for the tracks, right? Does everyone get where I'm going with this? We're just adjustment. Yeah, Ben, the basement does look great. We're just adjusting back and forth pros versus cons. So we're ending up at 1.77 right now, right? That's where we're landed. Now, when you look at the square footage of this home, guys, it's a larger house than ours. We're 2,400. They're 2,500 to 3,000. We have to adjust for the square footage. They're a bigger property. They have more space. They have more living room. You know, in my mind, quite honestly, that's already another 50, 60,000 just on that square footage alone. Because if they have an extra 1,000 square feet on us, which they probably, you know, they at least have 300, 400, 500, if not more. What do we allow for that? And where does that space show up? Oftentimes it's in the bedrooms upstairs that we see the biggest difference in that square footage. Sometimes it's on the main floor. So let's take a look again. They have an entrance foyer. We have a foyer. Theirs is larger than ours. We don't have this much space here in our house, right? Let me make this bigger for you guys. We have a family room. They have a family room. That's no different. They have nicer windows than we do for sure. I'm just trying to figure out where that extra square footage shows up, right? Same, we have a kitchen similar. They have that kitchen. It looks, we have stone, they have stone. We have a family room. They have a family room. They do have that sunken family room. So again, there's that conversation of the basement, right? The lowered ceiling. Does that impact the basement? They have this nice mudroom space. We don't have that. That's an added value for sure. This is a lot larger. They have like a little living room in their master bedroom. We do not have that for sure, right? See this? We don't have that square footage there. So they're a larger home. So we have to adjust for that. Now, what you can do is look at the cost per square foot and just deduct the difference in square feet if you'd like to do it that way, if you want a formula. So if you pull that square footage report I talked about at the beginning, and it says that this one is 2,900 square feet and we're 24, then we know that there's a square footage difference. Now, if I take this, the sale price and divide it out by the square footage amount, I will get the cost per square foot of the home. Then I can just do that calculation on the difference and then subtract that from from our property in regard to the price, right? Makes sense to everybody? So we can say,
sorry to interrupt.
yes, no problem.
So just to kind of work backwards with this, if you were trying to price based on upgrades that you put to the house, so I'm going to do like a basic, so you go to a contractor, a roof is going to be 10,000. Do you up your pricing by 10,000 exactly, or do you kind of give a couple thousand more because time is money, or whatever explanation you have for it?
Like if we were going to do our roof, or our roof
Yeah.
was just done.
Yeah. So for example, somebody's going to list, but you see that their roof is really bad, and they said, okay, you know what, does it make sense for me to repair it first before I list it? How would you go about that? Like, how would you recommend getting it fixed?
Yeah, there's actually, I would recommend getting it fixed if you can do it in a reasonable timeline. Like if you can get the roofing company in the next couple of weeks, then I would get it fixed and then list it, because we can promote that it's a brand new roof and there's added value there for sure. And you might get a little bit more for the fact that it's already done and the buyer doesn't have to deal with that, right? If it's going to take 2 months to get the roof done, I would probably either to do one of two things. I would not do it and just sell it as is, or I would say to the buyer that we have it arranged and it is being completed on this date. And I would allow for it in the price when I list it then, if the seller is paying for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, Lisa, I wish it showed us the cost per square foot at the bottom. That would be amazing. That's why I checked, but it's not here because I only have half. Mine is only half because it's the Stratus matrix. So unfortunately, yeah, unfortunately, we don't have all of the features that the full matrix has, which is kind of silly.
Yeah, it'll give, ours will give list square footage, cost per square footage, and sold cost per square footage.
Wow, that's good info. And especially when you're doing CMAs, that saves you guys a ton of time, right?
Except
and it allows
a lot of our houses are very unique and not always can you use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. In general, cost per square foot is a very challenging thing to do with a home.
Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah.
What just got factored into that one that we just did was both the train tracks, positive or negative, and the pool, positive or negative. So again, it doesn't really talk very well in regards to the
So Michelle just did the math here, and apples to apples, before we allow for any of the other adjustments, the square footage difference would put us at 1.572, right? And then we have to look at the train tracks and the pool and all those different factors, right? And then also what we haven't really discussed yet is the condition of our renovations. First of all, they were done this year, so they're brand new. It was pretty much the whole house overhauled, and we put in some really nicer high-ender finishes because we're going to be living there. So, we can't show you pictures, unfortunately, but the kitchen is nicely done. There's a big island. There's nice countertops. There's like hardwood floor throughout the entire house. There's pot lights. So we have to also allow for the fact that the homes in the 1.5s, the other comparables, because we haven't talked about that yet. Where'd they go? They're all inferior to ours. So what we can do by looking at this is say, okay, we know that at 1.572, which is based on the square footage and based on the other comparable sales, we're superior to those other comparable sales, right? And then we can adjust for the fact that this home is on the train tracks. So we can allow added money for our property because we're not on train tracks and they are. If we're allowing for that to be 50,000, that puts us into like 1.630, right? Give or take. Everyone with me so far? How do I get back to the list? There we go. And then we have to look at, okay, let's take this one here at Moorcrest that's sold for 1.570 and kind of start to figure out, and this one at Atridge at 1.56, how much better are we than them based on our finishes, right? Because we know on the other Atridge one that was at 1.9, we know the square footage was larger. We've adjusted for that. And we know that it had, the finished basement and things like that. So does that put us at 1.6, 1.7? Where are we landing? So Michelle is saying 1.7 and 1.75. So what we're doing is looking at our lower end comparables that we're better than and saying, okay, we know that, we put over 100,000 into our property and these homes don't have that. Does that put us at 1.67 automatically? Does it put us at 1.6 automatically? Which ones are the best comparables? Now, Cedar, which is the side split, and the only one that's a side split here, is also the lowest sale price, and the layout is different. So at this point, we can almost remove that because it's no longer helping us determine the price. It's kind of gotten itself removed from the process. And what we're seeing is that we know that adjusted at 1,572 for this 1.9, and then allowing for the train tracks, that puts us into the 163 range, allowing for the fact that we're better than at Ridge and by Moorcrest based on condition and finishes and upgrades by close to 100,000. We're putting ourselves up into the high 1.6s, right? So at the very least, worst case scenario, we're going to sell this house in the high 1.6 numbers. Now, what we have to now consider is what I call Realtor Gut, because we know the neighborhood, we know the homes, we've been in comparables, and every home feels and shows a little differently. So is it, as Michelle said so accurately here, is it 1.7? But what I can now go to my sellers and tell them is that 1.65 to 1.75, 1.75 might be a bit high unless we got really lucky, which would be nice. But, you know, from 1.65 to 1.725, we know we're in that window. What I can't promise you is exactly what a buyer is going to dictate the value to be. But I can tell you that based on these homes, Moorcrest, At Ridge, and Cedar being inferior properties, and that creates a floor for our property, I know I'm going to get more than Moorcrest. So I know I'm getting above 1.57, guarantee that. And 1.9 being a superior home based on square footage and the fact that it had the finished basement and the pool, we know for sure that that's our window, that's our range. Then we have to do what Michelle did here and go with our gut. Michelle has seen some of our house, not the whole thing, but some of it. So she knows the finishes and what like type of work we've done. And we can equate that now with what we see happening in the market. So based on all of these numbers, would 1.65 be a fair number to choose? Possibly. Would 1.7 be a better number, a more accurate market value based on the gap in the range here? Probably. So if I was to list the home, and if Michelle was to list the home, thank you for confirming this, Michelle, by the way. Michelle was to list the home, we would be looking at and telling our seller, you're going to receive around 1.7. So how am I going to list the house based on that? And that's when we get into pricing strategies, right? Are we going to hold back offers? Are we going to list around market value? Or are we going to be unrealistic and list really high, which isn't a discussion here. So in our market, when we're in a market that's trending downwards, and this goes back to Mike's original question almost, which was, how do we educate clients? Mike, we show them everything I'm telling you right now, and we explain it to them. That's how we educate them. And then we explain what their range is based on how we've educated them. And then we explain that based on the fact that we are seeing homes not sell, we want to be a bit more aggressive in our approach to the market. And so we're probably going to list it right close to that 1.7 mark, because I don't want to be chasing a market. I don't want to list at 1.725 and not sell. I want to list at 1.7 and sell tomorrow, right? Because that's my goal, to sell my house. Now, if I list at 1.7 and I get 1.65, am I going to be upset? No, because I knew that that was a possibility. But I also know that I'm not going to sell it for 1.62, right? Based on the comparables and based on the information and education I've received. So when you are doing a CMA, guys, this is why it's so important to preview as many of the homes as you can and be out there every day looking at houses. It's the best way to know the things that we're able to tell you innately, the value of a pool, the train tracks, the ravine, things like that, a finished basement versus unfinished. We know this because we spend every day in the market, right? So we are in our tools, we're in our world every day, looking at the houses, previewing them, being able to speak to the slopey floors and the unfinished basement and the sunken ceilings. We can allow for that because we've seen the product. If you're not seeing your product, how do you know what you're selling? Doesn't make sense, right? And so ultimately, sorry, Jill,
can I chime in there?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just to help answer that that question again that Mike had asked, how do we educate clients on a downturn in the market? Everything that Jen said here is true. And then there's a couple other tools that you can start to implement. Jen, if you can let me share my screen. I don't know if I'm able to do that. Oh, there we go. I think I can do it.
Yeah, no, you should be good now.
There you go. So you can start to get other tools and look at other times where this has happened. So one of the things that I do with Market Watch is I take the stats and I put them into my own spreadsheet every year or every month. And I've got dating back to 2014. So I can look at 2017 here and say, hey, Remember when this happened last time and we saw this downslope? Well, what happens when you don't take the good offer in May because you didn't think it was as good as what your neighbor sold for last month? Well, look at how long it might take you to get back to that price that you could have taken in May, right? So when I look at those numbers, it makes the big difference on how I can help educate them on why they should take the sooner offer as opposed to the later offer, right? So I look at those, and then also as we're in the shift, what we look at, and one of the reasons why we know we're in a shift is because we've seen homes already start to sell for lower than what they were selling for in January. So I look at those prices. I'll compare one of the ones that had just sold recently, comparing to the ones in January, and say, look, it's already happening. The guy in March that just sold is already feeling like, hey, why didn't I get the same amount that the guy got in January? And as we're seeing these new impacts on the market, especially with rates increasing, where do we think we're going to be in May and June? So it's better to take that action now than to wait and chase the market.
And then also look at the trend lines, right? We're starting to see that downward trend kick in where we didn't have that in some of the previous years. It was more flatlined, right? So you can, even though it may not have shown up yet in the numbers, we can still see the trend and where it's headed. Michelle, that's a sheet that Dylan does himself. He's been tracking it for years. Yeah. So talk to him and see if you can finagle a way to get a copy of it or something. But yeah, this is why stats are huge, guys. If you don't know how to read stats, if you don't know how to read Market Watch, and you don't understand what stats mean, you need to educate yourself. Because when we can use the stats to speak to our sellers, that's when we do the heavy lifting, right? Let the market tell them what's happening. And one of the best scripts that we can always use when our sellers kind of go, hey, I want February pricing, other than saying, well, unfortunately, it's now April and we've seen a shift in things happening. What we can always say to someone is, I can understand that you want to receive that price. And I know it's hard to kind of wrap your head around the idea that 2 months ago, your home was worth $100,000 more than it's currently worth, if that's what the average is, or that's what the number is. Here's what I want you to think about. If we try to chase February's numbers and we price ourselves up here, and you can draw a graph to do this as well, when we price ourselves up here when the market's here, by the time we correct and catch up to where the market is, we've also lost the value of April and May. So we're not only losing the 100,000 from February and the 20 or 30,000 from March, we're also now risking losing the money from April and the money from May if we sell it all. So let me ask you, is the 1.6 I can get you from your house today worth risking to try and get 100,000? Right? Always put it that way. I can get you 1.6 today, or we can chase 100,000. What would you rather have in your pocket? 0 or 100,000 or the 1.6? Right? You always have to present it in a way where the seller is faced with the information and faced with the decision in a logical way, so that it makes sense to them and they feel a bit of pain around it. Visual is always best, Michelle, 100%, especially when we're talking about values. When you go to a CMA, bring all of the listings, bring all of your work, right? When I go, I have sheets and they're highlighted and I've got writing on them, and I'm explaining to them my process. And then I'm breaking it down for them. And at the very end, what I'm doing when I get to the end is positioning it to them in 3 ways. This is your high, right? 1.75 is your high. And the reason for that is because this house here in Atridge that I showed you a few minutes ago, they had bigger square footage, they were fully renovated, and they sold for this much, right? Do you agree with me that that's a superior home? Yes, I do. It's larger, perfect. They're not going to fight you on that ceiling anymore, because you've proven to them why that's their ceiling. And then you flip on the other side and you're going to see this home here that's on Atridge that sold for $516. Same area, same style, not renovated at all, not updated at all, unfinished basement, backing onto the tracks. We know that we're better than that house in every way possible. Does that make sense to you? Do you agree with me on that? Right. So what can we say for sure that this is our floor? So what that's telling me is I know that I'm worth somewhere between 1.5 and 1.75. Now what I need to decipher is where in that middle do we land? On our end, we land at the higher end somewhat. We're not at the peak because our basement's not finished. That's why we're not at 1.75 and higher, right? It's that 100,000 in the basement. But if we know that, then does that put us at 165, 167, 117, 172? Where are we in that window? And we can't guarantee them an exact price. I don't know what the buyer's going to write down. What I know is that you should sell between 165 and 1725. So let's price it to make sure we're in that window, so that when buyers come see us, they see the value based on the comparables makes sense, and they're excited about buying our property, because that's what we need to do in order to be the one home that sells this week when 3 won't, right? The other thing I always like to say to people when we're in a down market and we're shifting downward is that every home has its moment, right? Every home has one moment in time where they're the best option, no matter what. Sometimes it takes 2 months to get there because you outprice it and you wait, and all this other inventory comes up, and then you start chasing the market, which means you're doing price reduction, and eventually you get there and you have your moment. Some people come out, they look great, their renovations are good, they're priced bang on what buyers are looking at right now, and they pop off. That's why even in a bad market, you will still see people fight for a really great property because they see the value. That's our job as realtors, is to present the home to make sure that the value shows and that buyers see it. If buyers see value, they buy. That's a general statement. If they see value, they buy. That's why the market goes up so quickly, right? When we get into those hot markets, because all of a sudden every listing is value because, oh my God, the market's going crazy. I just need to buy a townhouse in Aurora. So I'm going to pay 1.2 because next month I might have to pay 1.3. That's what happens, right? And we only have one product. Then we shift into a market like we're in now, and all of a sudden buyers have choices. So if you're priced high, your seller's unrealistic, or you don't show well, you're going to have to wait out all of the products that are better than you before it becomes your week. And if that takes 3 or 4 weeks, now you're at the market is now dictating to you, is your week 50,000 less than it was when you came out, or is your week the number that you wanted? Because a month could change things really quickly in a down market. It goes downhill fast, right? Just like it goes up fast, it comes down equally as fast. And your sellers need to understand that. So the best thing you can do is practice how you're going to present the information. Bring them the data, bring them the comparables, explain it to them, and let logic do its job. And create structure. This is your bottom, this is your top. Have them tie back to you. Does that make sense? Do you agree with me? And if they say no, I've had it happen. No, we're better than that house. Okay, maybe I'm missing something. Can you tell me what it is that I missed? What's better about your home than this home? And then sometimes they have an answer, which you can then educate them why that's wrong. And sometimes they don't, and they just sit there and stare blankly at you. And you have to handle that. This is where scripts come in. You have to handle that cautiously. You don't want to insult them. But you also want to be clear that, you know what, just because you think it's better doesn't mean it's actually better in the eyes of all the other buyers. And the best answer to that is to go, you know what, Lisa, I totally get it. I know that you love that you have train tracks in your backyard and the sound helps you go to sleep at night because it's a beautiful hum and it's calming. I get it. And that's how you feel about it. But let's look at all the other homes in the neighborhood that have sold that are on tracks versus the ones that haven't. And you're going to see that there's a difference in what buyers are willing to pay. And that's the only difference in the reasoning for that. What that tells us is that even though you love them, not everybody else does. And unfortunately, you're not the one buying this home. You're the one selling this home, right? So we need to price it to attract all those buyers that don't like train tracks. Does that make sense? Right? Yeah, it does. It makes sense. So that's the skill you have to start to learn. How do you explain things to people? How do you present the information in a way that makes sense? All right. And on that note, we've gone over by half an hour. I appreciate all of your guys' time. This is so hard to get through in an hour, honestly, because there's just so many questions and thoughts that people have. Hopefully we answered every question you guys have and that made sense to you how to do this. If it didn't, send us an email or a text message or whatever, and we'll do our best to answer those questions for you throughout the day today. All right. This has also been recorded, so it will be uploaded onto YouTube for the coaching channel. If you want to watch it back, you most definitely can. And, you know, as always, we're here to help. So if you have questions, please ask us. Okay. Happy Easter, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Jen, I was happy to finally join. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hopefully I can get a couple more. And thanks, guys.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.